A shy girl goes to see a doctor for women's health. To her surprise, her doctor is a young, successful man who falls deeply in love with her. Emma Stone's hands shook as she held onto the clipboard, her fingers squeezing the pen tightly. The waiting room at the women's health clinic looked clean and new, but no amount of soft light or calming music could stop the worry twisting in her stomach. She really didn't want to be there. Her heartbeat raced as she looked at the form in front of her. Name, birthday, health history. These were simple questions, but her mind felt like a jumbled mess. She wiped her sweaty hands on her jeans and forced herself to focus. Just fill out the form, Emma. It's not that hard. But for her, it was. She had spent her whole life avoiding this moment, telling herself she didn't need to see a women's doctor. But after weeks of feeling unwell and searching for answers online late at night, which only made her fears worse, she finally gave in. The front desk had highly recommended Dr. Chris Evans, saying he was one of the best in the city. Emma hadn't thought much about it. To her, a doctor was just a doctor, old, serious, and professional. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened next. A nurse entered the waiting room, calling her name. Emma almost jumped up. She swallowed hard, clutching her form like it was her only hope. With shaky legs, she followed the nurse down a hallway, her stomach churning as she passed closed patient rooms, the smell of disinfectant filling the air. "You can sit down," the nurse said with a polite smile, pointing to a chair inside the doctor's office. "Dr. Evans will be in soon." Emma nodded, barely able to breathe. She sat up straight, her back stiff, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The room was tidy, with framed certificates on the walls and a smooth desk in the corner. The exam chair stood out like something from a scary movie. She tried not to stare at it, nervously twisting her fingers as she practiced what she would say. "Be calm, act normal. Just get through this." And then Emma completely forgot how to breathe. The man who walked in was not the kind of doctor she had imagined. Dr. Chris Evans was strikingly handsome, tall with broad shoulders and a naturally attractive face. His dark hair was a bit messy, his jawline sharp, and his deep blue eyes held an easy confidence. He wasn't supposed to look like this. Emma's mouth went dry. "Miss Stone." His voice was smooth, calm, and professional. He gave her a reassuring smile as he closed the door behind him. Emma tried to answer, but nothing came out. She was too busy panicking. He was young, he was good-looking, and he was going to examine her. Oh no, this was bad. Chris sat down across from her, looking through her patient file. "I see this is your first time visiting a women's doctor." Emma nodded so quickly she almost hurt her neck. Chris's smile stayed gentle. "I know this can make you feel nervous, but I promise we'll go at your pace. Nothing will happen unless you're comfortable." She nodded again, her cheeks burning. Chris noticed her tension, the way she wouldn't meet his eyes, how she seemed to want to disappear into the chair. She was different from most patients, shy, timid, and delicate in a way that made him feel a connection. He leaned forward, his voice softer. "How are you feeling right now?" Emma squeezed her hands together. "Fine," she lied. Chris let out a small, warm laugh. "You don't need to be nervous with me. I promise, I'm not that scary." Emma disagreed. He was terrifying, not because of who he was, but because of how he made her feel. She had never reacted to anyone like this before. Her heart raced, her hands sweated. Her body was hyper-aware of his every move, and Chris noticed. He saw her body language, the way she avoided his gaze, the blush on her cheeks. She was just lovely. Chris had met thousands of patients, confident ones, anxious ones, even some who flirted with him. But Emma was different. Her vulnerability made him want to be gentle. He had never mixed feelings with his work, but something about her made him want to protect her. He cleared his throat, pushing those feelings aside. "Focus, Chris. You're her doctor, not just some guy at a bar." "Before we start," he said lightly, "do you have any questions for me?" Emma paused. She had a million questions, but none would come out, so she just shook her head. Chris watched her for a moment, then smiled again. "All right, let's get started." Emma knew this would be the longest appointment of her life. She practically ran out of the clinic that day, her heart still pounding as she walked down the busy sidewalk, her hands clammy, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She had never felt so out of place. Dr. Chris Evans was just too much, too handsome, too charming, too kind. And the worst part was, he had been gentle and understanding, which made it even harder because she couldn't even be mad at him. She was mad at herself instead, for the way her stomach flipped when he spoke, for the way her skin tingled when he shook her hand, for the way she almost melted just looking at him. She could never go back there. Not in a million years. But fate had other plans. For the next 2 weeks, Emma ignored every call from the clinic. Her medication needed to be changed. She didn't care. She needed a follow-up, she wasn't going. But her health problems got worse, and no amount of avoidance could make them go away. So she found herself back in that same waiting room, gripping the arms of the chair like it was the only thing keeping her alive. This time, she silently wished for a different doctor. Someone older, someone boring, someone who wouldn't make her brain stop working. But of course, life had other ideas. The nurse called her name, and the person waiting for her was, once again, Dr. Chris Evans, looking as unfairly handsome as ever. He looked up from his file when she entered and smiled. "Emma," he said, closing the folder. "I was starting to think you were avoiding me." Her breath caught. He noticed. Her stomach twisted as she quickly sat down, eyes fixed on the floor. I wasn't," she lied. Chris leaned forward, his face kind, amused, but also full of questions. "You missed your next visit," he said. "And when we tried to call, you didn't answer." Emma felt like she was dying inside. I got busy," she mumbled. Chris didn't believe her, but let it go. Instead, he watched her closely, noticing her nervousness. She had been nervous last time, too, and knowing that made him feel even more protective. He had seen thousands of patients, but no one quite like Emma Stone. Emma, meanwhile, was trying not to faint. Every second in that room felt like torture. She knew he was just doing his job, not thinking about this the way she was. But it didn't matter. She had to get out as quickly as possible. So, as soon as the appointment ended, she practically ran for the door, mumbling a quick thank you as she disappeared down the hall. And Chris, for reasons he couldn't explain, felt a sudden sadness as he watched her leave. He didn't expect to see her again so soon, especially not outside the clinic. But a few days later, as he stepped into his favorite coffee shop before work, he spotted a familiar figure by the window, curled up with a book. It was Emma. She hadn't seen him yet, lost in her novel, sometimes tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, biting her lip in thought. She looked peaceful here, so different from the nervous patient in his office. For some reason, that made Chris pause. Suddenly, she wasn't just a patient. She was someone he wanted to know, not just as a doctor, but as Emma herself. He took a deep breath and walked over. "Fancy seeing you here," he said, leaning slightly against the table. Emma froze mid-sip, her eyes wide as she looked up at him. For a moment, she just stared, her brain trying to process what was happening. Then she choked on her coffee. Chris tried not to laugh. Emma wanted to disappear. For the second time, Dr. Chris Evans had surprised her. She held her coffee cup tightly, her heart racing. He was perfectly calm, his blue eyes sparkling with amusement. Hi," she managed, wiping her mouth. Chris chuckled softly, sliding into the seat across from her. "I didn't know you came here often," he said, glancing around. "This is my usual spot." Emma swallowed hard, trying not to panic. This was not where she expected to see him again. I like the quiet here," she mumbled, hoping he wouldn't notice her nerves. Chris smiled gently. "Me too, actually." And just like that, an easy silence settled between them. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to really look at him. He wore a fitted dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, showing strong forearms. His watch looked expensive. He seemed to belong to a different world. Yet here he was, looking at her as if she was the most interesting person in the room. That idea scared her. A few days later, Emma's world changed again. She was scrolling through her phone when she found an article that made her stomach drop. Dr. Chris Evans, the millionaire doctor behind a major medical group. She froze, heart pounding. Chris wasn't just any doctor. He was a top name in women's health, a leader with several hospitals under his control, including the clinic she visited. And on top of that, he was incredibly wealthy. Emma could barely breathe. It wasn't just that he was successful. It was that she had been so naive, thinking he was just a regular person. But now the truth was clear. Chris Evans was out of reach, impossible to get close to. And she was just Emma Stone, a normal girl struggling to pay rent, trying to figure out life one day at a time. They weren't equal in any way. Chris noticed the change right away. Emma started avoiding him, ignoring his texts, not coming to the coffee shop, missing her follow-up appointments. Suddenly, he realized he might lose her before he even understood what was happening between them. He couldn't accept that. One evening, he found her. Emma had just finished her shift at the bookstore where she worked. Her bag slung over her shoulder as she stepped onto the sidewalk. And there he was, leaning against his sleek black car, arms crossed, eyes fixed on her. Emma's heart jumped. "Chris," she said, her voice catching. His gaze never wavered. "Are you trying to avoid me?" His voice was calm, but there was something deeper beneath it. Emma looked away. "No, I've just been busy." Chris stepped closer. "Emma, don't lie to me." She clenched her fists. "Why does it matter? You're a big deal and I'm just me. We're from different worlds, Chris. I don't want people to think I'm chasing you for your money." Chris stared at her, then laughed. A genuine, surprised laugh. Emma's cheeks burned. "Why are you laughing at me?" she asked. Chris shook his head, his face softening. "Because, Emma, I think you're the first person in my life who's ever tried to run away from me because of my money." Emma had no words. For the first time, she saw the tiredness in his eyes. He looked at her not as a doctor, not as a millionaire, but as a man trying to understand her. Suddenly, she wasn't so sure about running away anymore. Emma tried to keep her distance. She avoided the coffee shop, turned down his invitations, ignored his texts, even though each one made her heart ache. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore her own feelings. Every time she saw his name on her phone, she wanted to reply. Every time she passed the clinic, she had to force herself not to look inside. Every night, she saw his face in her mind, heard his voice, felt his presence. That scared her, because Chris Evans wasn't just someone she could fall in love with. He was someone she could lose herself in. So she ran away again. But Chris didn't give up. At first, he gave her space. He let her process her feelings. But when days turned into weeks, and Emma still refused to let him in, he knew he had to do more. So he simply started showing up. Not in big, dramatic ways, but in small, everyday moments. At the bookstore, pretending to browse while chatting with her. At the coffee shop, sitting quietly in his usual spot, never pushing, just being there. Slowly, his approach worked. Emma stopped avoiding him. She stopped making excuses. One day, she even laughed at something he said, a real, genuine laugh. For the first time in weeks, Chris saw a crack in her emotional walls. But just as Emma was starting to feel comfortable, something happened that changed everything. It was late at night. She had stayed at work longer than usual, her head pounding, her body heavy with exhaustion. She hadn't felt well all day, but pushed through, telling herself it was just fatigue. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk, the world spun. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and everything went dark. The next thing she knew, she was somewhere warm and soft sheets beneath her. The steady sound of a medical machine beeping. Slowly, she opened her eyes and saw the last person she expected. Chris, sitting beside her hospital bed, his elbows on his knees, his face full of worry. The moment he saw her awake, he let out a sharp breath, relief flooding his face. "Emma," he whispered, "you scared me so much." Her throat was dry. What happened?" "You collapsed on the street," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "Someone called an ambulance. When I found out you were here, I came as fast as I could." Emma blinked, trying to process his words. He came for her. He dropped everything for her. Suddenly, all the walls she'd built up didn't matter anymore. Emma woke up to the soft glow of hospital lights and the quiet sound of voices outside the room. Her body felt heavy, her arms and legs weak, but it was the warmth next to her that made her turn her head. Chris sat beside her, his hands clasped, his usually confident face marked with worry. When her eyes fluttered open, he let out a breath of relief. "Emma, you really scared me." Emma blinked, her mind still catching up. "What happened?" Her voice was weak. Chris leaned in, needing to be closer. "You collapsed outside. You had a high fever, you were dehydrated, and you were pushing yourself too hard." Emma tried to sit up, but he was right there, steadying her. For the first time, she saw it in his eyes. Not pity, not just duty, but something gentle, strong, and real. He shouldn't be here, she thought. He shouldn't look at her like that, because if he did, she might start to believe it was true. She might start to believe that someone like him could actually want someone like her. And she couldn't afford that kind of heartbreak. So she did what she always did. She pushed him away. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Chris's eyebrows furrowed. "What did you say?" Emma looked away. "You don't have to do this for me." His jaw tightened. "Do what?" "This. Taking care of me. Sitting here all night, acting like I matter." Chris's body went still, his face dark with emotion. "You think I'm here because I feel obligated?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, because yes, that's what she thought. She didn't want to be a burden. "I don't need your kindness, Chris. Not like charity." His eyes flashed with something she'd never seen before. Frustration? Anger? Something deeper. "This isn't charity, Emma," he said, his voice tight. "This is me caring about you." She let out a breathless laugh. "Why would you?" Chris's fingers curled at his sides. "What do you mean, why?" "Why me?" she whispered. "You have everything: money, success, women who would do anything to be with you. So why are you here for me?" His breath caught, and then he finally said it. "Because I like you, Emma. I really do." Emma's heart stopped for a moment. The words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. But before she could process it, fear took over again. She shook her head, gripping the blanket. "No, that doesn't make sense." Chris's jaw tightened. "Why not?" "Because you have everything, and I have nothing. How am I supposed to believe you need me?" Silence filled the room. Chris's eyes never left hers. For the first time, Emma saw something broken and sad in his gaze. Maybe she wasn't the only one who was scared. Chris took a deep breath, his hands tightening into fists before relaxing. For a long moment, he said nothing, just looked at her. His blue eyes searching, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "You think I have everything perfect?" he whispered. "That my life is flawless, without problems? That I don't know what it feels like to not be good enough?" Emma frowned. "Isn't it perfect?" Chris let out a bitter laugh. "No, Emma, it's not." She stared at him, surprised by the sharpness in his voice. She had always seen Chris as unreachable, successful, wealthy, confident. But now, for the first time, she saw something else, something real. "I wasn't always like this," Chris continued, rubbing his hands together. "I didn't grow up rich. My parents worked hard, but we struggled. I put myself through medical school with scholarships and part-time jobs." Emma held her breath, watching him speak with quiet honesty. "When I finally became a doctor and started making money, I thought I'd made it. I thought I'd done everything right." His voice dropped lower. "And then I met someone special." Emma's stomach twisted. "What happened?" Chris let out a slow breath. "She didn't love me for who I was. She loved my money and what it could buy." Emma's chest tightened with sympathy. Chris glanced at her, his face unreadable. "I found out she'd been seeing someone else behind my back. Everything we had was just an act for her." Emma sucked in a sharp breath. This wasn't the perfect Chris Evans she'd imagined. This was a man who had been deeply hurt, left with scars no one else could see. "I haven't let anyone close since then," Chris admitted. "I told myself I didn't need to. It was easier to be alone." He looked up, his gaze burning into hers. "But then I met you, Emma." Emma froze. Her heart stopped. Suddenly, nothing else mattered: the hospital room, the past, the fear. It was just him and her and the truth between them. Emma swallowed, trying to find her voice. "Chris!" He shook his head. "No, let me finish." He stepped closer. Emma's throat tightened. Chris took another step, now right in front of her, so close she could feel his warmth. "I don't care what you have or don't have. I don't care about your background. I don't care if you think you're not good enough. All I care about," he whispered, "is you, Emma." Outside, the city lights twinkled against the night sky. The soft hum of the hospital filled the silence. Then Chris gently cupped her face, tilting her chin up until their eyes met. "I want you, Emma," he whispered, his voice full of feeling. "Just you and no one else." Emma's breath caught, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe him. That night, Emma lay awake, Chris's words echoing in her mind. "I want you, Emma. Just you." She had spent so much time believing she wasn't good enough, that love wasn't meant for her. And yet Chris had chosen her. But could she believe in this love? Could she believe in him? The next few days were a blur of doubt. Emma avoided calling him, avoided making a decision, even though deep down she knew the answer. Because the truth was, when she imagined her life without Chris, it felt empty. And that scared her more than falling in love. Chris waited. He didn't push, didn't demand an answer, didn't force her into anything. He knew Emma needed time. And as much as it hurt to wait, he was willing to do it, because she was worth it. But Emma couldn't run from her feelings forever. When the moment came, she didn't think. She just acted. She ran through the busy city streets, her heart pounding, until she reached his clinic. She burst through the doors, breathless, searching for him. She saw him at the end of the hall, talking to a nurse. Chris turned, surprised. But before he could say a word, Emma was already moving, straight into his arms. For the first time, she didn't hold back. Chris barely had time to react before Emma wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest, holding him like he was the only thing keeping her standing. His body stiffened in shock, then melted into her embrace, his arms coming around her, strong and steady. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, her voice muffled. "I don't want to run away anymore, Chris." Chris's breath caught, and in that moment, he knew. She had chosen him. She had chosen them. Nothing else mattered. Emma never thought she'd end up here, wrapped in the arms of a man who once seemed so far out of reach, her heart beating in time with his. But now, standing in the quiet of Chris's office, his arms around her, she knew this was real. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Chris became her safe place. She still had doubts, still heard the voice in her head telling her she wasn't good enough. But every time that fear crept in, Chris was there, reminding her she was enough. 1 year later, Chris took her back to the same coffee shop where their story began. Emma didn't think much of it until she noticed how nervous he was, how he played with his coffee cup, how he reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. Then, right there in the middle of the busy shop, he dropped to one knee with a small velvet box and love shining in his eyes. Emma gasped, her heart in her throat. Chris smiled up at her, his voice soft but certain. "Emma Stone, will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. A year ago, she would have run away. But now, there was only one answer. "Yes, I will." The coffee shop erupted in cheers, but all Emma could hear was her own heartbeat and Chris's quiet promise that they would never be alone again. And just like that, Emma and Chris's story came full circle, from an unexpected meeting in a doctor's office to a love neither of them saw coming. She once thought she wasn't good enough. He once thought he'd never open his heart again. But love found them anyway. Not in grand gestures, but in the quiet, steady presence of someone who refused to walk away. Because in the end, love isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing each other every single day. Did this story touch your heart? If you loved Emma and Chris's journey, don't forget to click the like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to True Movement Stories. We bring you emotional, Heartfelt stories that will stay with you long after the last word. Until next time, keep believing in love, in second chances, and in the magic of the unexpected. We'll see you in the next story we share.